Emmett Lewis Till was an African-American teenager who was tortured and lynched in Mississippi in 1955 after he was accused of being inappropriate with a white woman in a grocery store. The young man, who was 14 at the time, was beaten to the extent that his body was beyond recognition. This unwarranted and brutal murder caused a lot of uproar and drew a lot of attention to the racist persecution of African Americans in the United States. Welcome to YARO Crime. Today, we'll be taking a look at the disheartening and violent murder of Emmett Till. But before we move on, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with our latest videos. Emmett Till, popularly known as Bobo, was born on July 25, 1941, to father Lewis Till and mother Mamie Till, and he grew up on the south side of Chicago. Emmett never got the opportunity to meet his father because his parents had separated before he was even born. His father had been drafted to join the army during the Second World War and was later killed. Emmett and his mother Mamie were said to have been very close, so close that you could sometimes confuse them for brother and sister. Emmett was practically raised by his grandmother, as he spent most of his time with her because his mother had to work. His mother would go to work all day and leave Emmett behind with his grandmother. Emmett spent most of his time playing with his cousin and friends who lived on 63rd Street. One summer, one of Emmett's uncles visited from Mississippi for a funeral and was about to go back with one of Emmett's cousins. Hearing this, Emmett was thrilled and wanted to follow them too and spend the summer in Mississippi. He begged his mother to let him go. Mamie initially didn't buy into the idea, but she later agreed. Emmett and Mamie met with his Uncle Moses at the train station, and while they were waiting for the train, Emmett left his watch with his mom because he didn't think that he needed to keep up with the time where he was going. Emmett got on the train, and his mom watched him as he left, but she didn't know that would be the last time she would see her son alive. Emmett had left Chicago and gotten to Mississippi, which was a different environment with a different set of rules and laws that had been created from racist ideology. But Emmett didn't realize this at the time and continued to live like he was still in Chicago. Emmett was an instinctive person. He walked around the house and played in the field. On the day that changed their lives forever, Emmett and his cousin decided to go to the store where kids their age hung out. On getting there, they decided to go into the store to buy some candy. Now the exact story of what really transpired in the store is quite unclear. Emmett's cousin was said to have left Emmett at the store, and this is where the story gets tricky. The white clerk at the store, Mrs. Bryant, claimed that Emmett had made inappropriate advances towards her, harassing and touching her inappropriately, but Emmett's cousin claimed that nothing of the sort happened, and that, in fact, Emmett got the candy that he wanted and left the shop. There have been many versions of what transpired in the store that day, but it is certain that whatever happened did not sit well with the white clerk. Emmett was said to have wolf whistled at the white clerk when she walked out of the store towards her car, and this had gotten the kids alarmed and scared, as they knew that would definitely not sit right with the white folks if word got out. On getting back home, they reported to their Uncle Moses what had transpired at the shop. Hearing this, the family urged Moses to send Emmett back home to Chicago. 3 days later, on August 28, 1955, there was a knock at the door. It was Mr. Bryant, the husband of the white clerk at the store. He had apparently gotten word of what had transpired at the store and had grabbed a black teenager from the street. He asked one of his wife's companions, who had witnessed the entire ordeal at the store, to identify the boy, but the companion pointed out that the boy Mr. Bryant had pulled off the street wasn't the boy at the store. They then heard that the boy was from Chicago, and witnesses are said to have overheard Mr. Bryant and his brother are discussing the best way to grab the boy from his house. Upon getting to Emmett's uncle's residence, Mr. Bryant requested that Emmett be brought to him, which was something Emmett's Uncle Moses was reluctant to do. Mr. Bryant, however, forced his way in, and given that he was holding a pistol, Moses was scared for his life. Moses claimed that Mr. Bryant had insisted that he was going to drive the boy up the road, give him a hopping, and bring him back to the house. Moses' wife had begged and even offered some money, but but Bryant had refused to yield to her plea. They instead dragged Emmett, put him in the back of their truck, and drove him miles away. Moses and his family had waited all night for Emmett to be brought back home, but as the night passed, their fears that they would never see Emmett increased. No one knew what had happened until 3 days later, when some boys who had gone over to the Tallahatchie River to do some fishing found Emmett's body disfigured and swollen. His head was mutilated and had been shot above his right ear, with his eye dislodged from the socket. Evidence showed that he had been brutally beaten all over his body. He had been bound with barbed wire to a 70-pound fan blade. His body was unrecognizable due to the trauma. The funeral home requested an immediate burial of the body, but Emmett Till insisted that the body be brought over to Chicago. According to witnesses, Mr. Bryant and some men had recruited 2 black men and initially taken Emmett back to Bryant's grocery shop. They reported having forced the black men to help beat up Emmett. They then took Emmett back to a barn in Drew, a city in Sunflower, Mississippi, where they continued to beat him mercilessly. Some witnesses who passed by the barn reported hearing beatings, yelling, and crying from the barn. There were claims that Till had been shot and then tossed over the Black Bay Bridge in Glendora, Mississippi, near the Tallahatchie River. After dumping the body, these men drove back to Bryant's residence, where they burned their clothes. Roy Bryan and his half-brother, J.W. Marlene, were arrested and indicted for the murder of Emmett Louis Till, and what followed right after was the trial. The trial was held in the county courthouse in Sumner, the western seat of Tallahatchie County, because that was the area where Emmett's body was discovered. The trial was held in September 1955 and lasted for 5 days. The defense started by questioning whether or not the body found was in fact Emmett Till, as the body was badly mutilated and that it was possible that Emmett was still alive and only just missing. The brothers claimed that they had released the boy later that night. During the trial, a couple of witnesses were called to testify, who claimed to have heard beatings, screaming, and yelling from the barn. At the end of the trial, the 2 were acquitted by an all-white and all-male jury after a 67-minute deliberation. In later interviews, the jury stated that they knew that Roy and Marlene were guilty, but they didn't feel like they deserved life imprisonment or the death penalty, which were the only possible outcomes of a capital murder case in Mississippi. After the trial, T.R. Howard, a social activist, paid the cost of relocating Moses, Reed, and another black witness who had testified against Roy and Marlene in an effort to keep them protected. Till's murder caused a lot of fear amongst individuals in the black community as they noticed how they could be subjected to violence without protection from the law. The 2 men later admitted to being guilty of torturing and murdering Emmett. This led to them being ostracized by most of their friends, family, and supporters. Even the people who had contributed to the funding during their trial cut them off. The 2 eventually moved to Texas after receiving a lot of heat from individuals in the community. Over the next couple of years, Marlene was tried for multiple offenses, including assault and battery, writing bad checks, and using a stolen credit card. He later died of spinal cancer on December 30th, 1980, at the age of 30. Meanwhile, Bryant worked as a welder, but couldn't continue on account of his blindness. He and Carolyn got divorced, and he got remarried in 1980. He was convicted of food stamp fraud in 1984 and 1988. Bryant never showed any remorse for what he did to young Emmett Till and insisted that if he hadn't gotten outlined, it probably wouldn't have happened to him. Till's murder was one that caused a lot of uproar among the black community and sparked a nationwide call for justice. Mammy insisted that Emmett's funeral be an open casket so the world could see what they had done to her son. Emmett's funeral was attended by tens of thousands, and images of his mutilated body spread across the country with his story, gaining a lot of attention from media houses across the country. In the early 21st century, an Emmett Till Memorial Commission was established to remember the young boy, whose murder went largely unpunished by a racist system, and to help contribute to society in his name. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think about this case in the comments, and please do not forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest videos.